The day the sky filled with silver lights, people across the world stopped in their tracks, staring upward in silence. At first, there was fear, because for generations, stories had warned that if something ever came from the stars, it would bring destruction. Families clung to each other, governments scrambled for answers, and soldiers prepared for the worst. But when the massive ships broke through the clouds, no fire rained down. Instead, they hovered with eerie calmness, casting shadows so large they darkened cities below. A voice came through every device, radios, televisions, even personal phones, smooth and cold, speaking in a language no human had ever known, yet somehow understood. The message was short and sharp. Earth was primitive, weak, and of little interest. The words stung like an insult meant to belittle. But what unsettled humanity most was the tone, mocking, almost amused, as though the visitors looked upon Earth not as equals, not even as enemies, but as a curiosity to laugh at. In the days that followed, people gathered in fields, on rooftops, and in crowded streets, watching the alien fleet that lingered above. Some prayed, some protested, and others demanded answers from their leaders. Scientists tried to make sense of the ship's strange designs, sleek and beyond comprehension, while military experts admitted quietly that no human weapon could compare. Yet, despite their superior power, the visitors never attacked. They remained like spectators in the sky, as though humanity were part of an experiment. Broadcasts repeated their mocking words, reminding everyone that Earth was not worth fearing, not worth respecting. Children asked their parents why the strangers would come all this way only to insult them, and parents struggled to find words. The insult did more than frighten. It sparked something deeper, a quiet anger, a sense that being underestimated was somehow worse than being threatened. Across nations, ordinary people began to question what it meant to be called primitive. Was it the lack of advanced machines? The endless wars? The way humans fought among themselves? Yet beneath the fear, there was also unity, because for the first time in history, every person on Earth was looked at as the same, small, weak, and mocked by something greater. That shared humiliation planted a seed, not of surrender, but of determination. Humanity had always carried flaws, but it had also carried resilience, creativity, and spirit. As the alien ships glowed against the night sky, countless eyes watched them, not only with fear, but with a growing fire inside. If these visitors thought Earth was too simple to matter, too weak to resist, they had overlooked something powerful. Humanity might not have the strongest weapons, but it had reasons to fight, reasons far beyond pride. In that silence between Earth and the sky, a question echoed in every heart. How long before the visitors learned that calling humans primitive was the greatest mistake they could ever make? The ships did not leave. They floated above cities, deserts, and oceans, silent and watchful, like predators circling prey they did not intend to eat but enjoyed toying with. Days turned into weeks, and the world adjusted to the strange presence in the sky, but the feeling of being observed never faded. Cameras recorded faint lights blinking across the hulls, and scientists guessed they were scanning devices, reading every signal, every movement, every part of human life. From space, the aliens watched television broadcasts, monitored conversations, and studied the smallest details of daily routines. What they saw only deepened their sense of mockery. They laughed at the endless arguments in parliaments, the shouting on news channels, the way nations fought among themselves even when facing a common unknown. They studied human inventions, cars, planes, machines that had once felt advanced, and dismissed them as crude tools, clumsy copies of what they had mastered centuries ago. They noted how much of human effort went not into progress but into rivalry, into building borders, into competing rather than uniting. More than anything, they judged humanity's emotions. To them, feelings were a weakness. They could not understand why humans cried over loss, risked everything for love, or clung to hope when logic said there was none. To the aliens, this was proof that Earth's people were not only primitive, but bound by flaws that would forever chain them to weakness. Yet while they mocked, they underestimated what they were truly seeing. From the ground, humans carried on, some ignoring the ships, some staring at them every night, but all feeling the weight of being measured like animals in a cage. It was humiliating to know that every mistake, every conflict, every tear was being watched from above. Still, inside that humiliation was a quiet fire. Teachers reminded their students that the ability to feel was not weakness, but humanity's greatest strength. Farmers continued planting, mothers comforted children, artists painted scenes of the glowing ships, and soldiers trained harder than ever, knowing they were being underestimated. The aliens saw emotions and called them flaws, but humans lived them as proof of meaning, proof that life was more than survival. And though the observers above could not understand it, the people below began to feel something shift. Being mocked hurt, but it also united. For once, borders and flags mattered less than the truth that the entire planet was under the same watchful eyes. Every insult from above added to the quiet determination forming across Earth, a determination that one day the so-called primitives would show the visitors what it truly meant to be human. The silence from above did not last forever. One morning, as people went about their day trying to live under the uneasy shadow of the ships, a new message thundered across the world, cutting into broadcasts and echoing through every speaker and screen. The aliens announced that Earth would be tested. No longer would words alone decide if humanity deserved to exist freely. Instead, a trial would be held, one that would prove whether this so-called primitive race had any claim to independence. The message was cold and final. Humans must fight for their survival, not against the full might of the alien fleet, but in a controlled challenge of strength and will. The terms were simple, but the meaning was terrifying. Fail, and Earth would belong to them. The world fell into shock. Leaders gathered in secret meetings, arguing about whether it was even possible to face such a trial when their technology lagged centuries behind. Scientists debated if the aliens sought knowledge, entertainment, or dominance, but ordinary people only felt the fear of being judged like contestants in a game they never chose to play. Across the planet, the air grew heavy with tension. Some hoped it was only a bluff, a cruel joke meant to break morale. But soon, alien machines descended, placing strange structures in deserts, forests, and oceans, each one glowing with an otherworldly light. These were the arenas, the places where the trials would unfold. Humanity had no choice but to respond. Soldiers were trained, not just with weapons, but with strategies meant to test ingenuity, teamwork, and courage. Volunteers stepped forward, not all from the military. Farmers, doctors, athletes, and workers raised their hands, determined to show that humanity's spirit went beyond armies and guns. Families wept, fearing what would come, yet pride stirred when they saw their loved ones refuse to bow. The aliens watched all this with detached amusement, confident that no matter how hard humans tried, they would fail. They measured success in firepower, in sleek machines, and cold precision, blind to the truth that was slowly forming. For humanity, this was not just about survival of the body, but survival of the soul. To be called primitive and mocked was one thing. To be stripped of dignity and freedom was another. And so, the stage was set. The world held its breath as the trial began. Every heart knowing that what was about to unfold would not only decide the fate of Earth, but also reveal to the visitors above what it truly meant to be human. The first trial was announced, and with it came a wave of fear that stretched from one end of the earth to the other. Humanity knew they were standing against a force that was centuries ahead in knowledge and weapons, yet something powerful stirred inside them, a refusal to give up. The struggle began not with machines of steel, but with the people themselves, people who had nothing in common but the will to stand together. Soldiers prepared for combat, their training sharpened, but they knew this fight would not be won by bullets alone. Farmers left their fields to provide food for those who would carry the weight of the challenge, turning harvests into supplies. Engineers gathered in dimly lit workshops, trying to bend human technology in new ways, pushing against limits they once thought unbreakable. Even children played their part, carrying messages, gathering resources, or simply reminding their families why the fight mattered. Everywhere the air was filled with tension, but also with determination. The aliens, floating high above, observed with silent interest, still convinced that humans were only prolonging the inevitable. They laughed at the clumsy machines being built, the patched-up armor, and the simple weapons polished as if they could stand against alien craft. But what they could not see was the fire burning in the hearts of those preparing below. This was not a battle for power. It was a struggle for existence, for dignity, for the right to decide their own future. Every hand that worked, every voice that encouraged, every heart that hoped added strength to the effort. The first wave of the struggle was marked by confusion and loss, but humanity refused to scatter. When one group stumbled, another rose. When one village failed, another stood taller. People who had once argued over borders, languages, and beliefs now looked at one another as allies, no longer divided by lines but united by survival. The struggle was not only in the arenas the aliens had built, but also in the spirit of the people who would not allow themselves to be crushed. Mothers taught their children that courage was stronger than fear. Fathers reminded their families that strength was not only in muscle, but in unity. The elderly whispered stories of resilience from long ago, giving younger generations a reason to keep pushing forward. As the trials began, the world held its breath. Humans faced impossible odds with simple tools, but they carried something unseen by the invaders, a will that refused to be broken. Every step, every act of defiance became a message written without words. Humanity might be outmatched in weapons, but not in spirit. The struggle had only just begun, and though the road ahead was filled with shadows, there was a light growing in the unity of the people, a light the aliens could not yet understand. The aliens had come prepared to measure humanity by the same rules they used for themselves, by the size of weapons, the speed of machines, and the strength of armies. To them, survival was a calculation of firepower, nothing more. When they looked down and saw humans carrying swords sharpened against old stones, armor patched with leather, and weapons that looked like toys compared to their own technology, they thought victory was already written. Yet what shook them, what they had not expected, was the way humans refused to fall apart. Every time a human unit was struck down, another would rise to take its place. Villages shared food with strangers, soldiers protected those they had never met, and children offered water to the weary. The aliens watched in silence as people gave everything, even their safety, for the sake of others. Sacrifice was a concept the invaders did not understand. In their world, the weak were abandoned, left behind so the strong could move forward. But on Earth, weakness was carried, not discarded. A wounded soldier was lifted on the shoulders of comrades, not left on the field. Farmers gave away their crops to feed the fighters, even if it meant going hungry themselves. Engineers worked sleepless nights with bleeding hands, determined to craft one more shield, one more weapon, even if it bought only a few minutes of survival. Humanity was not fighting only for themselves. They were fighting for one another. That unity confused the aliens, for it was something their advanced machines could not replicate. Defeat came often, yet it never stayed. The aliens saw humans lose battles but never lose their spirit. When their homes were burned, they built again. When their lines were broken, they regrouped. When their voices trembled, they still shouted back. This stubborn will to rise after every fall rattled the cold logic of the visitors. For the first time, the invaders realized that strength could not always be counted in weapons. It lived in the hearts of people who refused to surrender, no matter how uneven the fight. The trials had been designed as a show of dominance, a cruel game to remind Earth of its weakness. Instead, it became a mirror that reflected something the aliens could not measure, a spirit of resilience and unity. Every small act of kindness, every shared sacrifice, every moment of stubborn defiance grew into a force stronger than steel. The aliens had come expecting to see a primitive species break apart under pressure. Instead, they found a people who stood taller the more they were pressed down. And in that discovery, a quiet fear began to grow within them. For they understood that humanity's greatest strength was not in the tools they carried, but in the unshakable bond that bound them together. The moment that shifted everything did not begin with an army, nor with powerful weapons, but with a small band of humans who refused to give up. They were not the strongest nor the best trained, but they carried something the aliens had never faced before: imagination. With little more than scraps of broken tools, stolen wires, and the determination to fight back, they studied the invaders' machines closely. While the aliens believed humans were too simple to understand their technology, these few dared to ask questions, to test, to fail, and to try again. They realized that the machines, though powerful, carried weaknesses hidden in their design. Where the aliens relied on strength, humans relied on cleverness, and this difference became the spark of change. In the cover of night, this group set their plan in motion. Instead of meeting the invaders with force, they used deception. They lured patrol drones into traps, rewired broken parts, and discovered ways to feed the machines false signals. What had been built as flawless systems now stumbled under human tricks. A weapon meant to destroy was turned back against its owners, its fire redirected by hands that had once only known farming and crafting. The aliens, who had laughed at the idea of humans touching their machines, now watched in disbelief as their own creations betrayed them. The battle that followed was not large, but it was enough to shake the ground of alien confidence. For the first time, their perfect order was disrupted, and they realized that their enemy was not as predictable as they thought. The humans fought with nothing but quick thinking, courage, and the refusal to play by the rules set against them. Instead of meeting power with power, they met it with creativity, and in that creativity they found victory. Word of the success spread quickly across human settlements. People who had been losing hope now felt a fire rising inside them. If a small group could turn the enemy's own strength into weakness, then maybe the battle for survival was not hopeless after all. The invaders, on the other hand, began to whisper among themselves. Their cold amusement was replaced with unease. They had called humans primitive, but what kind of primitive mind could take advanced technology and twist it into a weapon of resistance? What kind of so-called weak species could find victory without matching strength? That night became the turning point. It was not just a battle won, it was a message. The aliens learned that humanity's greatest danger to them was not in the weapons they carried, but in the ideas they created. A sword could be broken, a shield could be crushed, but imagination could not be defeated so easily. From that moment on, every machine, every weapon, every plan the invaders held seemed less secure. Because they now knew that somewhere, humans were watching, learning, and preparing to strike back in ways no alien mind could ever predict. The victory that had lifted human spirits came with a shadow that could not be ignored. Behind the cheering voices and the stories of clever triumph lay the silence of those who never returned. Families waited for footsteps that would not come. Children stared at doors hoping to see faces that were already gone, and the weight of sacrifice pressed heavily on every heart. The cost of resistance was clear. Lives had been given for a chance at freedom. Grief swept through villages and cities alike, yet instead of crushing the human spirit, it ignited something deeper. People wept, but in their tears grew a determination that even the invaders could not understand. The pain of loss was not a chain to hold them down. It became the fire that pushed them forward. Every name whispered in mourning became a promise, a reminder that those sacrifices could not be in vain. Men and women who had once feared standing up now stepped forward, fueled by the memory of what had been lost. Farmers who had never held weapons stood beside soldiers. Builders repaired broken shelters, while inventors searched for new ways to twist alien machines against their masters. Even children carried the weight, not by fighting, but by keeping alive the stories of bravery and refusing to let those memories fade. For humanity, every life lost became a seed of strength, planting courage in the hearts of the living. The aliens, watching from their high vantage points, noticed the strange reaction. In their world, loss meant weakness. When one fell, the rest grew afraid. But here, the opposite was true. The more humans suffered, the more united they became. The invaders expected despair to break them, but instead it sharpened their resolve like steel hammered in fire. They began to realize that what they had called weakness, emotions, grief, loyalty, was the very thing making humans unstoppable. Machines could measure power, but they could not measure love, and it was love, not weapons, that now drove humanity forward. In the quiet of the night, as the fires of battle dimmed and the morning songs rose, people looked at the stars with a new kind of strength. They did not wish for easy victories anymore. They wished to honor the fallen by never giving up. Each scar, each tear, each empty seat at the table became part of the fight. And while the aliens had armies and weapons beyond measure, humans had something that could not be stolen or destroyed, the courage born from sacrifice. The cost of resistance was heavy, yet it was also the proof of what made humanity different. Loss did not end the story. It gave the story meaning, and as long as even one human remained standing, carrying the memory of those who had fallen, the fight would continue, not as a desperate struggle for survival, but as a promise that no life had been lost for nothing. The aliens who once spoke with laughter and arrogance now stood in quiet disbelief, unable to understand what they were witnessing. For them, survival had always been about domination, about controlling, conquering, and proving superiority with weapons and fear. But humanity showed them something entirely different. People were not fighting because they loved battle or wanted power. They were fighting because behind every act of resistance stood family, children, and the hope of tomorrow. Fathers shielded their households, mothers carried both the weight of grief and the courage to inspire others, and the young stepped forward not for glory, but to ensure that a future even existed. The aliens had studied countless worlds, each of them bowing to stronger armies, yet Earth was different. Here, love itself had become a weapon. When soldiers fell, others rose not for vengeance alone, but to protect what those lives represented. When homes burned, communities rebuilt with trembling hands but steady hearts, proving that loss could not erase hope. Even the simplest acts carried power, neighbors sharing food in the ruins of a city, children comforting the wounded with soft words, strangers treating one another like family. These things puzzled the invaders, for in their eyes emotion was weakness. But here it was the very reason the humans endured. The aliens began to see that humans were not fighting to avoid chains. They were fighting to ensure that future generations would never have to wear them. What unsettled the aliens most was that humans carried their grief openly, yet turned it into strength. The invaders could crush armies, but they could not crush the will that rose from love and loyalty. Humanity's battlefields were not just marked with weapons, but with songs, prayers, and promises whispered over graves. To the aliens, these things were meaningless, yet the results were undeniable. Again and again, humans stood where no one should have stood, fought where no one should have fought, and found courage where there should have been none left. The lesson was impossible to ignore. True strength was not in machines or firepower, but in bonds that no amount of force could sever. Humanity was proving that survival meant more than living another day. It meant holding on to dignity, protecting the weak, and passing hope forward. The aliens, once so certain of their superiority, now began to question their own way of existence. For the first time, they looked upon humans not as subjects to be ruled, but as beings who carried something greater than strength: purpose. The trial they had created to mock and humiliate Earth was instead teaching them what no empire had ever shown. They were facing a species that valued love as much as life, and that made them impossible to truly conquer. Humanity's lesson was clear. Power may rule for a moment, but only compassion and unity can endure for generations. The silence inside the alien command vessel was heavier than any explosion. For days they had watched humans rise from defeats that should have ended them, gathering strength not from weapons, but from unshakable bonds and unyielding spirit. At first, the leaders of the alien fleet dismissed this as foolishness, thinking humans were merely stubborn creatures clinging to survival. But as battles unfolded, they saw something they could not explain, an endurance that grew stronger in the face of pain, a will that refused to bend no matter the odds. It was then the alien leaders realized they were not facing a weak species at all. They were facing a force unlike any they had encountered in the stars. In their reports, the aliens could no longer use the word primitive. Such a description had become hollow and untrue. These humans, with their limited tools and fragile bodies, carried a kind of power that no machine could measure. They fought not just for themselves, but for one another, for homes, for memories, and for futures they might never see. That kind of spirit was beyond their understanding, and it humbled them in ways they had never imagined. The alien commanders, who once spoke with mocking certainty, now spoke with caution, their voices edged with respect. They knew at last that power alone could not conquer Earth. Among the fleet, Younger alien officers whispered their disbelief, asking how a species so young could stand so firm. The elders answered not with laughter this time, but with quiet acknowledgement. Humanity's strength was not in their technology, but in their heart. They admitted even to themselves that no amount of force could strip away the values humans carried: loyalty, sacrifice, love, and freedom. These were not weaknesses, as they once believed, but unbreakable shields that no weapon could pierce. Back on Earth, the people continued their struggle, unaware that they had already changed the minds of their enemies. Each act of courage, each refusal to give in, was reshaping the way the galaxy saw them. What began as a trial designed to humiliate had turned into a stage where humanity proved its worth. The aliens who had ruled countless worlds through fear now found themselves pausing before the idea of ruling Earth, because how could they rule a people who could not be broken? Respect once denied was now reluctantly given. The alien fleet leaders bowed their heads in private council, admitting that humans were not only survivors, but warriors of spirit. They understood that Earth was not just a planet to conquer, but a symbol of something they had never faced before. A living truth that strength is not measured by the size of armies, but by the courage of hearts. For the first time, they looked upon humanity not as subjects, but as equals. And in that quiet shift of thought, the story of mankind changed forever. Earth bore its scars like silent witnesses of what had been endured. Cities rebuilt stood beside ruins that remained as reminders, and the skies, though calm, seemed to carry echoes of the battles that had once threatened to silence humanity forever. Yet the world was unbroken. Out of loss came strength, and out of fear came courage. Humanity had proven, not only to the invaders, but also to itself, that true strength was never measured in weapons or machines, but in the reasons people chose to stand and fight. Families who had lost loved ones now carried their memory as living flames, keeping alive the promise that those sacrifices were not wasted. Across continents, people spoke of unity in a way that transcended borders and differences, because survival had shown them what it truly meant to be one people. The aliens had withdrawn, but the lesson they carried back into the stars was heavier than any defeat. They had come expecting to conquer a fragile world, and instead they left humbled by the unshakable will of a species that refused to bow. Among their fleets, humanity's name was spoken not with scorn but with respect, a rare acknowledgement of a truth they had never considered, that the mightiest weapon in existence was not a ship or a cannon, but a heart determined to protect what it loves. This shift did not only change how the aliens viewed Earth, it echoed across the universe as a reminder that spirit, sacrifice, and purpose could topple even the most calculated plans. On Earth, the struggle left behind a legacy that would shape future generations. Children grew up listening to stories of courage told not as myths, but as living history. They learned that courage was not about being fearless, but about standing firm in the face of fear. They learned that sacrifice was not about loss alone, but about giving meaning to the lives of those who remained. Humanity carried forward the truth that love and unity were not weaknesses, but the greatest strength of all. Though scars remained, they became symbols of resilience, proof that humanity had faced the impossible and emerged stronger. The invaders had sought to test humanity, but in the end it was humanity who tested them, teaching them that no power, no matter how advanced, could defeat a people fighting for family, for freedom, and for the generations yet to come. That legacy became more than just Earth's story. It became a beacon, a message carried through the stars, a reminder to all who heard it that dignity and purpose are stronger than fear. The war had ended, but the lesson remained eternal. Humanity had shown the universe that true strength is not found in domination, but in the choice to fight for something greater than oneself. And long after the wounds healed, that truth echoed forever, making Earth not just a survivor, but a symbol of hope.